Good stuff.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first governance forum with the PBSL. For those that don't know, my name is Tom Sears, and I'm chair of the PBSL and one of the board members. And tonight we're delighted to hand over to Seamus Gillen, who will be taking us through all issues relating to governance in the world of sport and in wider perspective as well. Seamus is from Value Alpha, an organisation that works globally with all sorts of bodies, from governance, sports bodies, big commercial companies, on board evaluation, improving governance across the piece. Seamus has got an enormous track record in this, which I'm sure he'll give you a bit more detail on. But suffice to say, he was shortlisted last year for the Governance Champion of the Year with the Chartered Institute of Governance Awards. So there's nobody better to take us through this process. The plan is to hold monthly sessions where Seamus will take us through a variety of different topics with various guests, and we're very lucky next month to be joined by Dame Catherine Granger, Chair of UK Sport, who Seamus will be discussing all sorts of issues around the Code for Sports Governance, how that's going to be updated, Catherine's journey into governance, and how she's found that transition from athlete, executive role into governance and leadership positions. So without further ado, Seamus, I will hand over to you.
Cool. Thank you, Tom. Thanks. Good evening, everyone. Will I put the slides up straight away? Probably not. Let me just start by saying hello to everyone and congratulating you, Tom, and PBSL for this initiative. It's a fact of life, actually, that if you want to be on the board of a company, like a listed company, some of our big and great listed companies, that there's no qualification needed. You don't have to have any qualification whatsoever to become a full board director. It's probably one of the anomalies in this country, although it's also the same fact around the world. So actually, people go on to boards who don't necessarily know how to be on a board, and end up potentially being quite ineffective. The board suffers as a consequence of those individuals not having the necessary training and board craft and so on. So a lot of my work is actually, more widely working with boards where that's a phenomenon. The fact is that many boards do have people who are highly trained on them, of course. But there was no qualification needed, technically, legally, from a regulatory perspective, to go on a board in this country. And I'm talking about the UK. I'm not sure if there's anyone here joining from other countries, but certainly from the UK perspective, that's an issue. And so one of the challenges for us really is, how do we get that level of capability and competence into our boards? Now, the sports sector is a particular discrete sector which has its own attributes, its own personality, its own dynamics. And so this initiative set up by Tom and PBSL is a very, very clever initiative, actually, because if we can build this pipeline of board-ready individuals who have been proven to have gone through a year's worth of, effectively, of learning and development of how to be on a board, how to perform on a board. Those of us who are on the call this evening have a far better chance of getting those non-exec directorship appointments, or just generally getting involved with boards in the way we want to. So maybe there's some people on the call tonight, and I'll want to hear from everybody later on about who you are and what you're thinking, what you're doing. But there's maybe some people already on boards who want to get better at being a board director, and it is possible to get better in terms of being a board director. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share some slides, first of all, to talk about the scheme itself. So 6, 7, 8 slides talking about the scheme itself. And then actually we're going to do some governance. So we've got 1.5 hours, and obviously you can hang around, or if you need to leave, go whenever you want to. But we're going to actually do some governance after I've described what this certificate program is all about. So I hope you'll find that enjoyable. And that's when I definitely would like you to be interacting with me to just test your knowledge and to test your sense of what you do actually know about governance. So tonight's a bit of an introductory session. And then in a month's time, we've got this amazing opportunity to hear from Catherine Granger. Um, and I'm hoping that all of you are going to want to be in on that, and more people as well, because actually people like Catherine are hard to get hold of. She's a bit of a, if you had to name the 5 most influential people in sport in the UK, Catherine is going to be in that top 5 list all the time. So to have that chance to actually have Catherine on the call with us and sharing her journey, and for us to be able to put our questions to her is a bit of a privilege, and it's a bit of a coup. And I have to say hats off Tom and the PBSL team for managing to get Catherine. So tonight, an introductory session. The next time out, first Tuesday of April, will be Catherine. And I hope that as a result of what we do tonight and what we do with Catherine next session, there's going to be a number of you who are going to be wanting to be part of the certificate program. So I'm going to share some slides, and I don't mind if you stay on mute, everyone. If you don't mind, just stay on mute because it's better for the dynamics of the call initially. But if you want to say something at any time, just unmute and please feel free to interrupt me. Once I start sharing slides, it becomes more difficult for me to see if you're putting your hand up or whatever. So don't worry about formalities. This is as informal as it gets. So let me just put these slides up, and hopefully, can you see these? Can one or two of you put your thumbs up just to say that yeah, well done. Thank you very much. And you can hear me okay. Hearing me is, yeah, you don't want to be looking at me. You want to be looking at these slides. So, this is what this program is going to be about. Let me just introduce myself. So I'm a chartered secretary. That's my professional career anchor. Some people are accountants, others are IT people or lawyers or whatever, marketeers or whatever. I'm a chartered secretary. I started my career in Whitehall, managed to get myself to a senior position there, and I worked for 2 cabinet ministers, John Gummer, and then John Prescott when he was Deputy Prime Minister. That was an amazing privilege, all of that. It's kind of, you do things that you only read about in the newspapers. I was very, very fortunate. I was very lucky. Then I went off into industry because I'd worked in the public sector, and I was very pleased and proud to have worked in the public sector, but I actually wanted to test myself in the private sector. So I went off, became company secretary at Anglian Water, which is based out of Huntingdon. It's the largest water company in the country. It's not the largest water company. It's the largest water company by surface area in the country. Then I went off to work for what was an emerging technology then, really, O2 mobile phones. Absolutely loved that. Both companies going through different journeys, particularly in terms of their culture and so on. And that's something that I picked up in working with those 2 companies. And then I set myself up in business. I've been going now for, I think, 15 years. During the time that, so I run Value Alpha, it's my company. During the time that I've been running my own company, I had a part-time job as a policy director of the Chartered Governance Institute, which is my professional body. Wrote the first guidance after the financial crisis in 2009 on behaviours in the boardroom. Then wrote the regulatory guidance in this country on board effectiveness, written country codes, 3 Baltic republics, Seychelles. Did a lot of technical work and so on. Anyway, the point is, I've also run a development program for company secretaries, and I run a LinkedIn discussion group on governance. So that's my background. 5 years ago, I was traveling a little bit anyway, but then 5 years ago, I didn't mean it to happen, but over the course of the past 5 years, I've basically become United's, so Emirates Airlines best customer. I've traveled all over the world working with boards and directors in different jurisdictions. And the reason I'm showing this is, first of all, I paid somebody to do this slide, so I'm trying to get my money's worth out of it. And secondly, because I just want to make the point that governance in different jurisdictions looks different. And governance in the sports sector looks different from governance in the not-for-profit sector or governance in the governmental sector or whatever. And I just really wanted to bring home the point that there are elements of good practice in governance, but equally there are key differences, and we always need to be aware of those differences depending on the sector within which we're operating. And one of the things we'll want to do as a community on this certificated program is look at where and when sport is different, but also you'll be learning stuff here which is applicable also to any other boards with which you interact in other sectors. So there's some real skills that we'll be learning on the program, which are definitely more widely applicable. I've had the great privilege to work with a load of sports. Again, I didn't really mean to do this, it happened, and I ended up working very extensively with some fantastic sports. I know there's some people on the call tonight from some of these sports. And of course, it's a very interesting time because we were supposed to have the Olympics last year. We're aiming for the Olympics now this year. A lot of these sports are actually medaling sports in the Olympics, and in fact, gold medal sports in the Olympics. And obviously, there's a lot of discussion about, are the Olympics going to go ahead? I think yes. Will they go ahead in a way that we recognize? I think the answer is no. I don't think there'll be any international spectators. But anyway, you know, these are the kind of challenges that sports need to face up to. But I wouldn't want to talk just about Olympic sports. Many of these sports aren't Olympic sports, and they're as much about participation as they are about podium. And so what we're looking at is the pathway from participation to podium, from common community grassroots sports through to the elite. It's a massive sector. We love sport in the UK. In fact, people around the world love sport. I have to say that I think the people in the UK have a particular passion for sport, and will talk about sport as much as they'll talk about the weather. So it's a big sector. There's a lot of money in it. There's a lot of governance in it, and there's a lot of opportunity in it. And it's my firm view that if we work together in this certificated program, we're going to learn skills which are really going to help us to move on in this sector, whether it's at entry level, whether it's getting that next non-executive director role or whatever. So I think it's a really, really exciting initiative. And I think it's slightly ironic that the sports sector might actually manage to do something which the wider corporate sector doesn't do, which is actually prepare people to go and sit on the boards of national governing bodies and other kinds of sports. So it's a great opportunity, and I hope that a lot of you will want to be part of this journey. I wanted to talk about the program a bit, about the PBSL, and also about the program, because I didn't want to take for granted the fact that you know everything about it. And in fact, because it's new for all of us, I think it's good for all of us to look at what the program entails. And what I'd like to do is, once we've stopped this bit about PBSL and the certificated program, I'd like to take the slides off and just for a couple of minutes, just let people ask questions, particularly since Tom's on the call, for people to ask some questions from Tom, and maybe even from me, about the way this is all going to work. So it's a new initiative, a professional body looking to attract all these people who want to get either involved in the sport or more involved in the sport and driving the development of a new standard of sport industry leadership. I know that there are some people in PBSL who are, top of their game, and that by being part of the PBSL, you're going to gain access to people who are absolutely top class, who are actually absolutely at the top of their game, and who are going to be able to provide you with the kind of guidance and knowledge and skills and experience that you need to move on and into and through the sector. So some really top people involved in this initiative, I can assure you, and I'm not including myself. So what's the idea? A central platform where we can network, engage with each other, access our professional and personal support. And I really like the idea, it's all of us aiming for our personal best in the sports industry. And it's covering a range of levels of knowledge and experience. So you can be there at the beginning, you can be getting in at the ground floor, or you can be, up on first, second, third floor, and you're wanting to take the express elevator. So it's covering all ranges and working with people of all levels of knowledge and experience. The idea of the Certified Director course is that we'll meet on the first Tuesday of every month from 5:30 to 7. To the degree that there's anyone on the program from another country, different time zone, well, that's something we just have to accommodate. In one of my other programs I run, I have people who have 3 to 4 hour time differences on this kind of initiative. And they're very, very committed. 3 to 4 hour time differences, I should say, either way. So I've got people who are watching this at night time and people who are in the States watching it in the middle of their day. But anyway, what I found, my experience has been, you've got to stick to one time, one day of the month, because then everyone knows that's the evening to keep free. And we're going to be talking about governance and what good governance looks like, how it can be applied to the world of sport, and how you can bring that to bear in the skills needed to become an effective director. Some of the kind of things that we'll be looking at: the purpose of an organization, purpose of a board, short history of the evolution of governance, directors' duties and liabilities. So we're going to do the first bullet point this evening, actually. Hopefully you'll be able to hang around, and we'll have an interaction on the purpose of an organization and the purpose of a board. But we need to know where governance comes from. It's just a massive concept, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we can't ignore governance anymore now. And in the work that we'll be doing in the year ahead, I'll be bringing that to bear, how we can't ignore governance. It's just everywhere. It is surrounding us. It's enveloping us. And the only way to manage it is to learn about it and to understand the way it moves. And people who don't understand governance are taking a big risk. And my prediction is, so if you're on boards already, I'll be very interested when we come to talk about this later. I'd be very interested to hear what your experience is on the boards that you sit, where governance sits as a business critical activity. What I would generally say, if you haven't yet joined a board and you're looking to join a board, my guess is that you will be questioned fairly significantly on your knowledge and understanding of governance, because, as I say, it is everywhere. Duties and liabilities is important. How do you stay out of jail? People can get into difficulty as directors, including as directors of sports boards. Just because it's sport doesn't mean that you can't go to jail. You can go to jail. Not many directors, admittedly, do go, and I'm not trying to scare anyone, but understanding how to be professional, how to exercise your due care and diligence is important to make sure that you're relaxed in the work that you do. The most important role in the board is the role of the chair. The chair runs the board. The most important person in the business is the CEO. So the relationship between the chair and the CEO is the most important relationship inside any organization, including a sports body. The role of the secretary, critically important as well. That interrelationship between those three, for example, devising strategic agendas that allow an organization to plan its work ahead is one of the most important things any board can do. If it's not on the agenda, it doesn't get discussed. And how do you plan a strategic agenda? Well, you get the chair, the CEO, and the secretary to sit down together at the beginning of every year and say, this is what we're going to discuss throughout the year. And that's the way you begin to get a performing board. There's loads of tricks to learn about all of this stuff. Accountability to stakeholders, we're going to come on to that this evening, so I don't want to talk about that too much. Protecting the organization's franchise, its brand and its reputation, formulating, delivering strategy, holding management account. These are the kind of issues we'll be covering. Also, effective oversight of the risk management of the organization, the controls regime. When organizations fall over, it's often problems inside the controls regime, money goes missing, fraud, that kind of thing. You go from being on the back page of the Daily Mail to being on the front page of the Daily Mail, then you know it's all over. And then you're trying to protect your own personal reputation as well as everything else. Board leadership, board composition, difference in the boardroom, critical. Women, people from Black, Asian, minority, ethnic backgrounds, people with disabilities in the boardroom, getting away from the way in which we've been running boards in the past. The soft stuff, the vision, the mission, the values, the culture. That's also where organizations go wrong. It's not in the hard stuff, the soft stuff, board organization, board dilemmas. We'll be looking at all this kind of stuff. It will be fascinating discussion, seriously. And we'll get to the end of 1.5 hours once a month. And I can swear people will be saying, can we go on for a little bit longer? So that's the kind of stuff we're going to be looking at. At the end of the year, now you can just get involved in this and just be part of it for improving your knowledge of governance. But the idea of this is that at the end of the year, we invite you to attend a day of training. And as long as you've been present throughout the year and at the training, the end of the year training, you'll receive a certificate signifying that you are board ready, and particularly that you can bring behavioral and technical expertise and qualities of judgment and sound decision making to the board positions for which you're applying. And you're going to be in the vanguard. You are in the vanguard already by being here tonight. You're in the vanguard of this move to improve the standard of governance inside sports bodies. Now, yeah, I knew I'd put in a slide too many, so you can ignore that one because we've already discussed that one. What are the benefits? So this is what I've learned from the other work I've done with boards and directors, including online. You know, the past year for all of us have been online. A structured learning and development program based on good practice. We'll come on later to talk about best practice versus good practice. Controversially, I'm not a fan of best practice, but there's a reason I say that, and I'll explain that. But structured learning and development, understanding that tomorrow is a different day from today. Today is a different day from yesterday. We need to keep on learning and see how the world is changing. Using that learning to improve your performance and strengthen your knowledge, get the certificate, build up your CPD record. Some of you on the call tonight may be linked with other professional kind of activities where you need to evidence your CPD, your continuing professional development work. And so 12 monthly sessions, 1.5 hours a month is 18 hours of CPD. You'll get a certificate. Every time you attend, you get a certificate. So that evidences your CPD training to anybody who might need to know. Your professional network. I mean, I doubt that I need to tell anyone on the call tonight that networking is oxygen. If you want to develop anything in your career, we need to network. If we don't want to live, just stop breathing, stop networking. Everything comes from networking. Everything good in our lives comes from networking. So this will be the chance to network as well. Come on to talk about Catherine in a moment, but there'll be exclusive access to guest speakers. We'll host the sessions on Zoom. Hopefully everyone can like Zoom more than they like Teams. I don't really like Teams. I love Zoom. Hopefully everyone can access Zoom. Presentation, discussion, Q&A and conclusions. Everything gets recorded. And we're recording this tonight. And so I'll come on to that in a moment. So everything will get recorded and put into a membership area. So if you join the program, you gain access to a membership area. And what that membership area allows you to do is view the content. Go back anytime you like, on demand, just go back into the membership area, look at the slides, look at the chat box. So we'll be using the chat box this evening. So please feel free to say anything you like in the chat box, ask questions or whatever. And also look at the recordings. The recordings will be professionally recorded, professionally edited. And that means that you've got a continual library of top quality governance content to go and look at. And also something that I am very, very fond of is setting up a LinkedIn group. This is not a Facebook conversation. This is not a Facebook lifestyle discussion. This is a professional conversation. And on one of my other initiatives that I run, we have a LinkedIn group. You can only be in the group if you're a member of the program. And the LinkedIn group is where we have discussion, where we chat to each other, where we post content, ask questions, and so on. So the membership area is effectively an archive. It's a library, but you can access it all the time whenever you want to. The LinkedIn group is where the conversation between us happens, and posting content and posting articles and so on. So those are the benefits of the program, and for the cost involved in getting involved, that is really, I mean, that is a lot of value for money, I have to say. And I know from other work I do, other training I do, the cost is equivalent to a half-day training with a trainer. It's just phenomenally good value for money. So this is the course pricing. I'm going to leave this to Tom to answer questions on, because Tom and the team are the experts on the packaging. So free to PBSL members, subject to availability, other sports industry professionals can take part. The first session technically is this session, but I think we're discussing making the first session the Catherine Granger session, because she's such a big speaker. We want to get as many people onto that call as possible. So as part of our outreach, we will be encouraging you to be inviting your communities to be in on that discussion with Catherine, because it's not, that kind of discussion does not happen often. So we want a good crowd for that. And then the final one-day training session, different prices there depending on your membership of the PBSL. Okay, so our first guest speaker is Catherine, and that will be on the first Tuesday in April, whatever day that is. Look that up now. So the easy way of remembering is always the first Tuesday of each month. So the first Tuesday in April will be Tuesday the 6th of April. So Catherine will be with us on Tuesday the 6th of April. I think that's a real coup. And as I say, well done to Tom and the team for getting her. But actually, she's not the only person we're going to have as a guest speaker. We'll get other guest speakers as well. And I happen to know from this kind of training, this kind of online training, that these kind of guest speakers are just worth their weight in gold. So let's all make an effort to get as many people as we can on that call on the 6th of April. So we really challenge Catherine and really understand from the very top her perspective about sport. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop the share now. I'm going to take these slides down at the risk that I can't get them back up again. And I'd like people, if you don't mind, to come on screen. And Tom, you're there. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes, Tom, to allow colleagues to ask you any questions about how this works. So we can use the chat box, but personally, I'd encourage you just to come off mute and chat openly and ask Tom questions. Let us know, do you think it's a great idea? Do you think it's not going to fly? I mean, just let us know what you think about all of this, but particularly if you'd like to ask some specific questions about joining. So I'll let you, Tom, I'll let you host this for the next few minutes, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Seamus. And I think you've summarised it beautifully. So obviously the objective of this programme is to improve governance in sport. And we all understand it's an issue. If you look at any of the major controversies that we've had in the last few years, some of the governing bodies, you look at FIFA, some of the Olympic funded bodies that we've had, the issues all start with governance. So that's why we're so passionate about working with somebody like Seamus, who's a world expert on this, and make sure that we get it right. And the people that do start taking on the governance roles within our sports are board ready, as Seamus has alluded to. As Seamus mentioned, the first session will be the one with Dame Catherine Granger next month. And that will be free to anybody who registers for the Essentials membership or is already a PBSL member. And then as the course continues, that will be open to any PBSL members. So we very much hope that you'll join us and start making a difference, because it's so important that we do get this right. And I think Catherine Granger will talk a little bit about the update in the governance code for sport that's coming. And it's essential that we do work to that code, whether it's directly applicable or not. So if anybody's got any questions immediately about the programme or membership of the PBSL for the next few minutes, please feel free to ask myself, Seamus, or we've got one or two board members on the call as well.
Great, thanks, Tom. So would anybody like to, at this stage, there'll be an opportunity at the end of the call again, but is this clear enough, do you think, for all of you, or is there anyone who actually wants to ask for a point of clarification? So, okay, so that's good. So let's move on. And so we've spent half an hour now introducing the course. So I'd actually like to spend an hour on governance. So we can explore what we understand by governance and so on. So I'll put the screen back up, because otherwise I'm looking at Tom, and that is not a pretty sight. Only joking, Tom. Okay, so hopefully, can everyone see that okay? Yeah? Come up if you can see, please, for me, just so that I can hear. Yeah, we good? Tom, we good? Yep. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so before we get started, the three most important questions in governance. Well, certainly the first one I'm going to ask you is the most important question in governance. And the answer is the most important answer in governance. And so I need you to be interactive with me, please, because I want this. I'm only going to move on when I've had so many of you offering your thoughts and your answers. I don't think there's anyone on this call tonight who's been on my training per se. I've worked with a number of you, but I'm not sure there's anyone been on the training. If you have been on the training and you actually know the answers to the questions, I'd be grateful if you didn't mention them. So if you know the answers, please just sit back and listen. So I'm going to ask you some basic questions about governance, which you won't get in a textbook and you won't get in a governance code or whatever, but actually they go to the very heart of governance. And unless we've got this stuff right, then we're going to go off in the wrong direction just from the word go. So the first question I'm going to ask you is this, and it's a really, really simple question. Really simple question. And before I start asking the questions, when I work with boards all over the world, I'll often say to boards in a slightly challenging, slightly controversial way, you ought to know the answers to these questions. I don't put it like that because I like to get out of the country alive. But the gist of it is actually, if you've been on this board for 10 years, you really, or 5 years, you really ought to know the answers to these questions. That's the gist of it. But I'm not expecting that of you at all. So, but let me ask you the questions. Let's get going. So the very first question I want to ask you is the most important question in governance, and the answer is the most important answer in governance. And that's this. What is the purpose of an organization? What is the purpose of an organization? And I need you guys to come off mute and everything, because I want you to be answering, giving me some ideas. What's the purpose of an organization? And that's quite a tough question, really. It's quite an unfair question. But let me give you a clue. Every organization in the world has the same purpose. Now, that's really helped you, hasn't it? That has really completely helped you get to that right answer straight away. Every organization in the world has the same purpose. So would you like to, would somebody like to give me an idea of, you can put it in the chat box if I can get the thing up. So you can unmute, or we can talk in the chat box. What's the purpose of an organization? Now just unmute and just say hello and let's go. Let's go. Come on, guys.
Is it the kind of the reason they exist? So it's the purpose of what the organization is, or the reason they exist is to try and achieve the purpose of the organization and what it is they're trying to achieve.
Okay, Tracy, thank you for that. Thank you for being the very first person in this whole program to offer a review. Thank you. You are elevated to the peerage. Although we can't talk about the royal family tonight, can we?
Thought best to get in first, and then yeah, if I get in first, then it can't necessarily be the wrong answer. I can only go.
All the pressure's off, isn't it now? You can completely relax now. So the answer was a bit cyclical in a way, because you used the word purpose in your answer, to achieve the purpose of. So if I were being slightly challenging, I'd say that's got a bit cyclical in, but I think if you're saying to achieve the aims and objectives of the organization, that's certainly less cyclical because it doesn't use the word purpose. And I'd say to that, that's a really important building block. And I use the term building block a lot because boards do a whole load of things. And that's a really important building block activity and to achieve the objectives of the organization. So thank you for that. That's great. Thank you. Some other thoughts, please. Anybody else? 2 or 3 more thoughts, and then we'll go for it. Okay. Any thoughts, please? Come on.
I was going to say grow the sport, Seamus, but I'm not sure that relates to every organisation across all sectors.
No, and there, Matt, you've hit on it. You know, it doesn't represent Nightingale Hospital, which has been decommissioned, or it doesn't represent your local railway network, or you know, their job they wouldn't see as being to grow sport. But in the context of your particular interest, that's valid. But before we get to your specific particular interest, let's answer the question a bit more generically. So thank you very much, Tracy and Matt. Some other thoughts, please, some other ideas.
Is it not to serve the interests of the stakeholders of the organization? So typically speaking, most organizations will have shareholders or have investors, and in order to be successful for their return, which will be built into the goals and the objectives that you talked about. They need to serve the interests of those groups.
Yeah, so sorry, what's your name?
Hi, sorry, I'm Liseli.
Hi, Liseli. Hi. Yeah, well, look, first of all, you used a really important word, which is stakeholders, which is significant. Because when I ask a group of people, it's amazing, even people who aren't working in the corporate sector will say something like to grow shareholder value. And I'll say, you don't even have any shareholders. What are you talking about? What book did you swallow for breakfast? So talking about stakeholders is critically important. So we need to come back to that point about stakeholders. So I'm going to try and, because somebody's, Tom, I'm going to risk chucking us off this call. I'm going to disable annotation. I don't know if we get rid of that annotation now. I don't think we do. Let's see what happens. So no annotating, please. I've disabled it. Okay. Any other thoughts before? What's the purpose of an organisation? Every organisation has the same purpose.
Seamus, I'll have a go. It's a collective, a group of people with similar interests or objectives combining to bring their skills and experience together to achieve those.
Yeah, so you're talking about a kind of collective effort and teamwork and alignment to achieve objectives. And again, great, because we need, as we know, we need teamwork and alignment and common objectives and common purpose and all of that. I agree, but to what aim? What's the purpose? Why would we do that? To what aim? One more, and then I'll give you a clue. One other person.
I think to fulfill a need.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Ian, because actually, if you're not fulfilling a need while you're there, and the more you can fulfill somebody's needs, the more popular you're going to be. And certainly if you were charging for the service, the better off you would be. So meeting a need, I think, is a great point, a very good point. Okay, so let me give you the answer. So the purpose of an organization, whichever part of the world you're in, whether it's for profit, not for profit, sport, whatever sector, anything, the purpose of an organization is to grow value. Okay, is to grow value. How you define value depends on your business model. So Matt, generically, your business model is talking about growing participation, growing the sport. And depending on what sport you're from, Matt, it would be growing the popularity and participation levels within that particular sport. The business model for charity is different. For primary school, they all went back yesterday. You know, primary schools are there to help little children learn how to socialize with each other before they go to big school. And then the purpose of big school is to get pupils ready for either university or an apprenticeship or a job and so on. That's the value chain for education, and then for hospitals and health and everything. The purpose of an organization is to grow value, okay? And how you define value depends on your business model. Now, that is the most important question in governance, and that is the most important answer in governance. And you can be clever with all your friends, and you can ask them that question, and until they get the answer, then they cannot understand why they might be on a board or why they might want to be on a board. And if you get interviewed, that's where you start. That's what your job is in being on that board, to grow the value of the organization. Let me ask you a more specific question now, because that one was a bit wishy-washy. What's the main purpose of a board? Okay, so we're talking about being a director. We're talking about being an effective director. We're talking about an effective board. So I would define an effective board as a collective effort of effective directors. So if some of the directors on the board aren't effective, then by definition, the board is not going to be completely effective. I would agree with that, wouldn't we? That's just logical, really. What is the main purpose of a board? And again, if any of you know the answer, please don't say. What is the main purpose of a board? So this is critically important. Critically important. Any ideas? So go on, let's have some people have some ideas. Don't worry about you're not sure or you might look stupid or anything like that. Let's just have the conversation. Let's get going on this conversation. So particularly those who haven't said anything so far, it's early days. Let's have some other people offering some thoughts about what the main purpose of a board is. Any ideas?
This is one of the key ones, just to provide leadership to the whole organisation and also to help deliver that purpose, which is about creating and growing value.
So leadership, Ed, leadership on a board is so important. And most boards I work with do not lead. And that is a massive abdication of responsibility and a massive abdication of opportunity. Leadership, boards are there to lead. There's only two boards, those who lead and those who are victims. And if the board doesn't lead, then we can't expect anyone else to lead in the organization. You can't walk around the office and say, are you leading this organization today? And they turn around and say, well, Ed, I thought that's what you were supposed to be doing. Then you say, oh yeah, sorry about that. So leadership is really important, and we'll come back to that in a future session. So, you know, and so important, leadership inside the board. So yeah, that's a building block answer. How boards need to lead. So great, thank you, Ed. Someone else.
Demas.
Yeah, Neil.
Can I go with to manage, provide structure, and also to drive value in a transparent way?
Okay, so on that third answer, that third leg of the answer, you've kind of hopped to the third question. So you definitely need to be on this training because you're way ahead of me. But the rest of it was a bit building block, wasn't it? It's a bit, so these are activities. What's the main purpose of a board? And if you don't do it, you've just wasted 3 hours of your life or 4 hours of your life. Or if you're working inside a really bad board, you've wasted a whole day. But let's say a board meeting is 2 hours, you've wasted 2 hours. So if you haven't done it, you've wasted it. What is that? What is it supposed to have done?
So, Seamus, it's Terry Lynham from Rugby League World Cup. It's about making decisions, isn't it, on issues that the company's facing to kind of drive it forward? Yeah.
So, so that's the answer, Terry. Well done. Thank you. Oops, sorry. Let's go back on that. The purpose of a board is to take decisions. And if you're not taking decisions on a board, you're wasting your time. Absolutely wasting your time. So if you're not taking decisions, my advice to boards that don't take decisions is just go out and walk the dog. Or when lockdown ends, go shopping and buy a dog if you don't have a dog, and then walk it. Just do something better with your time than sit on a board that doesn't take decisions. Because the whole purpose of the board is to take decisions, to take high quality strategic decisions. Now, high quality decision making is driven by things like the quality of the management information presented to the board. You know, directors have to read papers to understand the issues and then take decisions. And if the quality of the management information, the MI, is weak and low, then, you know, garbage in, garbage out. People will take poor decisions. It's also driven by things like, did you get the papers a week before the meeting? Or did you get papers the night before the meeting? Or did you get a paper tabled at the meeting? To which the answer from the chair should be, I'm not taking that. If you can't be bothered getting it ready for me on time, you can wait another month, or you can wait another 3 months because I'm not looking at it. So to take decisions based on table papers or papers that are distributed a couple of days or a couple of hours before a meeting is going to lead to bad decision making. People who don't read the papers, have you ever been to a meeting where it's obvious that somebody hasn't read the papers? Because the answer to the question they've asked is in the papers. Had they read the papers, they would know. And yet it's one of the biggest weaknesses in boards around the world that directors don't read the papers. They think they can wing it. And that is just not acceptable. That is unprofessional. And then we have to look at the quality of the meeting itself. Is the meeting chaired well? And so on and so on. So that's the quality. That drives the quality of decision making. But strategic decision means what?
Seamus.
Yeah.
But one of what you're illustrating is actually one of the biggest problems within sport and sporting governance. It can exist also within other sectors as well. But sporting governance is writ large with people who I describe partly as blazers, or people who want because they think they can access tickets or look good in their community or whatever. So they don't make sure the organisation is sustainable. They don't ensure it's resilient, and they don't necessarily, in some cases, don't ensure the protection of the participants and those sorts of drivers. Now, whether you count that as adding value is a different matter, but I think it's one of the problems that exists within governance a lot.
Yeah, well, so your name disappeared as you started talking.
Charles.
Sorry?
Charles.
Charles, hi Charles. It's a great point, Charles. These people aren't adding value, they're taking value away. Because one of the things they're doing is destroying the golden currency of good governance, which is trust. If you have good governance, you generate trust. And if you are a poor performer on your board, you're destroying trust. So your stakeholders, that point that Lizelle was making earlier, your stakeholders just lose faith and they go somewhere else. So sport is full of this. Sport is rife with this. People who played squash for their county and they want to give something back. So they get onto the national governing body of squash in the UK, and they don't know how to behave as a board director. And their effect is net dilutive of the overall impact on the board. And I've seen it, I've worked with a lot of boards where people just are thinking about the tickets and the blazers and all of that kind of culture. And that's all got to change. And the reason it's got to change is because society expects more and stakeholders expect more. And if boards don't deliver against what stakeholders want, they just go out of fashion. They just go out of business. Because if we imagine a family has a child of 3 or 4 just going to primary school, and that child has got a whole career ahead of them of sports consumption. Could be football, could be rugby, could be ballet, netball, could be disability sports, this, that, or the other. If the first interactions of those parents with a particular sport is negative, you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, I'm pulling them out of that sport. I'm going to choose another sport. And a whole career's worth of revenue income disappears with that child as they go from ballet to something else, or they go from soccer to something else. So you're absolutely right. And these are the kind of issues that we need to contemplate. And sport is full of this. Unfortunately, sport is full of this stuff, of amateur directors on boards. And we need to weed it out. We need to get rid, because they're just destroying trust and they're destroying value. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So I think I don't think we've got the. Did we? Have we actually? Yeah. Terry made the point. So taking decisions. So the board is there to take decisions, to take high quality decisions and strategic decisions. And strategic decisions, as my good friend Chris, who's on the call, and I can see on the call. Strategic decisions are about the future. Why? Because as Chris would tell us, we all live in the future. And yet, if I look at a board pack, if I look at board minutes, if I look at a board meeting, they're spending most of the time discussing the past. Well, the past has a role to play to understand certain things, but if the board isn't working out the future, who is? Who's doing that? So strategic decision making is the board taking decisions about the future. And another big weakness in boards, not just sports boards, is that they do not spend enough time thinking about the future. And what does that word look like on a board agenda? It's called strategy. Strategy. And if I had my way and I had a magic wand and I could wave it, I'd have all boards looking at strategy 80% of the time, because it's all about the future. The past is gone. We're in the present, but it's all about the future. So boards are there to take high quality decisions about the future, strategic decisions, not overly operational decisions, not overly. So in response to the first 2 questions I asked you, I'd ask you the third question, and the answer is the answer to the first 2 questions. How might we define governance? How might we define governance? And the answer to that question is, what's the purpose of an organization and what's the purpose of a board? So that's how we define governance. And the formulation of words that I would put together to answer that is, governance is about creating the conditions to allow a board to take the best possible decisions to grow the value of the sport, to grow the value of the business model. How can we take the best possible decisions? What's standing in the way of taking those best possible decisions? And what do we need to do about it? And what role does the board play in getting rid of those obstacles in order to take the best possible decisions? What does good decision making look like? What does growing the value of the business look like? So those are three questions I've asked. What's the purpose of an organization? It's to grow the value of the sport, my sport, the sport I love. What's the value? What's the purpose of the board? Is to take decisions, to turn up and take decisions about the sport that I love, to move us on from being where we are. What's the governance of this organization? Is, do we have the circumstances, the conditions in place to take those best possible decisions to grow the value of the sport, to grow the value of my sport? Now, does anyone disagree with that? Or does anybody want to comment on that? Do any of you think, well, hadn't thought of it like that. I thought governance was about rules and regulations. I thought it was about a governance manual. I thought it was about, the AGM, the EGM. I thought it was about voting at meetings. Whereas actually governance is about, how do I create value for my sport? How do I get more parents getting involved in my sport? And in this country, how do I get more people with disabilities involved in my sport? How do I get more Black and Asian minority ethnic people involved in my sport? The biggest source of revenue growth in practically most sports is women. How do we get more women involved? How do we give more respect to women? How do we back them up and get them spending their precious dollars on my sport? So does anybody want to offer any thoughts at this stage before we move on? Just feel free to comment, and if not, we'll just move on.
Hey, Miss. It's Craig Flindle here. Hi.
Craig, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Good to see you again. It's very interesting, and listening to particularly how you summarise it. I mean, I do think governance has a bit of an image problem, and when you talk about it in general to people in the organisation, there's a bit of a sort of roll of the eyes, and it just come back to AGMs and the articles associations, and in our case the club rules, etc. But actually, when you boil it down to what you've just described, I think it gives it a very, very clear narrative, and I've made some notes on that, as I'm sure other people have. But I think it's probably incumbent on us as leaders in organisations to sort of take this forward, because it, as you said, when you boil it down to that, it's actually very, very simple. And straightforward, and actually you can see how this really sort of ties through the organisation. Because I'm sure we're all sat here as having been, most of us, involved with boards, and in most situations, those meetings, the contributions of people, the papers, who's read the papers, I'm sure 80% and 90% of us on this call would say it's not been effective. So I might be speaking out of turn, but maybe sport, I don't know if it's better or worse than other sectors. You've probably got a greater prevalence of owner managers and people who ploughed a lot of money, where there isn't actually any governance structure at all, because you just got one bloke at the top who makes all the decisions. I don't know, but it's some interesting observations. So just a comment on those.
Thanks for that, Craig. And what I'd say, Craig, is if we look upon governance like that, and governance is often confused with compliance, what you're talking about, a lot of the articles and the rules and so on, that's often compliance. Now, compliance is just one subset of governance. We have to be compliant because there's no prizes for breaking the rules. And if we break a big rule, then we go onto the front pages of the Daily Mail. And that's what we want to avoid. So governance is often mistaken with compliance, is one point I'd make. And if we view governance as about this, how do we grow the value of the business model? We then see governance as a business enabler, something that actually takes the business forward. as opposed to viewing it as a compliance subject matter, back office, cost, overhead, burden to the business. Do we have to do this governance? Well, actually, what they're talking about normally is compliance. Sorry, we're back on mute. Okay, so yeah, I agree, Craig, and we need to be proselytizing. We need to be going out championing this new view of governance, and that's why I say you don't get it in the books, you don't get it in the codes, because the people who write the code, including, with respect, probably the sports governance code as well, don't necessarily think about this. And Craig, you made a point which I should have mentioned at the beginning. This is all Chatham House. We can't have a proper conversation if we don't work on the basis of Chatham House. So once this group gets going, we'd want to talk about what's going on inside our own group, inside our own businesses as well, without the risk of it going outside of here. So yeah, so great point, great point. It's a liberating theology rather than a cost to the business, if we get it right. So I just want to ask you a few more questions, and then I'll show you some slides. So we talk about creating value, and value can be created, value can be destroyed, can't it? You know, we don't live in a world of total value creation. Value gets destroyed. And some people create value at the expense of other people's value destruction. So there are two ways in which an organization, a sports board, a sports organization creates value or destroys value. There are two sources of value. So if you say, okay, I buy into this, I want to create value for my sport, then there are two ways you can do it. Can you tell me what the two ways are that you can create value for your sport? Because if you buy into the idea the board is there to create value, then where does that value come from? Can any of you give me a name, a concept, a buzzword, a piece of jargon which describes where value comes from? Any idea?
Was it participation and revenue?
Okay. What does revenue, thank you, Claire. What does revenue, what's another word for revenue?
Money.
Yeah. Yeah, take it a bit higher. But what does revenue, where does your revenue come from? You said participation. What's the overall concept that we look at?
Growth.
Well, I know you're trying to get there. So it's called the business model. The business model and the strategy. That's where value comes from. If you've got a business model that works, you will make money all day long. And if you've got a business model that doesn't work, you will lose money all day long. And so that's why I go back to this example of that set of parents who get turned off a sport and go to another sport. They get turned off golf and they go to cricket. So somebody who represents cricket on this call tonight has got a new set of revenue projections based on that, those parents who will put their child through cricket for the next 18 years. If they go to university, cricket. So the business model, the first way in which we create value or destroy value is the business model, the strength of the business model. And it's all about money. So you are all running businesses. And the purpose of your activity is to make more money than you're losing or more money than you're spending. Because if you lose more money than you make, you're out of business. So it's your business model. And if you've got a great business model, you will be successful. And we do that by looking at the strategy, the business model, the business plan. That leads to issues around participation, revenue growth, and all of that. So if I just ask you to give me an example of 3 businesses, brand names, who you have used, all of you, not just Claire, but all of you have used, or broadly speaking, given COVID, and in one case particularly given COVID, have used in the past year business models which are just dominating everything, which are just destroying their competition everywhere. Give me 3 brand names.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Netflix would be another, Seamus.
Sorry?
Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix is good because the way it replaced Blockbusters. Do you remember you used to want to watch a video? You had to go out in the pouring rain, freezing cold, go down to a shop that had 50 titles on the shelf, choose the one you hated least, take it home, stick it in the machine, and then pay a £5 for a late fine because you didn't get it back to the shop in time. Now we sit at home, open a bottle of wine, and watch it on Netflix. So this is an example of a disruptive business model. Netflix is a great case study. But who said Amazon? Was it Claire? Is that Claire?
Yep.
Yeah. So Amazon is my number 2. Amazon, how many people have used Amazon in and around Christmas? Well, the only people who didn't, particularly under lockdown, are the people who have got an ethical problem with Amazon. And I get that, I understand that. But otherwise, probably everybody else used Amazon at least 10 times over Christmas and probably has booked something on Amazon today or yesterday. This is an example of a business model that is just making money just hand over fist because they found a way of satisfying customer need, customer demand, the need for convenience and price and choice and all of that. So that's, I could spend a long time on Amazon, but we don't have time. Give me a name of, I've got a number 1 and a number 3. So number 2 was Amazon. Give me a number 1 and number 3.
Peloton.
Deliveroo.
I was going to say Deliveroo.
Yeah, Deliveroo, now that's good, but Deliveroo have got competitors, Just Eat and Uber and so on. They've got competitors, but yeah, and they're about to float. Deliveroo are about to float and giving their customers a chance to buy shares. So that's transformational. And some of that will never go back after COVID because of the idea that you can actually get your food delivered to your door. It's a good example, thank you, but it does have competitors. But try 2 others.
Airbnb, not through
Thank you.
COVID, but
Who said Airbnb?
Terry.
Terry, thank you, Terry. Has anyone here used Airbnb? No? It's transformational. It's transformational. You want to go somewhere on holiday, you go online, you find somewhere better than what you were looking at through Thomas Cook when it hadn't gone bust, cheaper, and everything better about it. It's better value for money. Airbnb is transformational. It's transformational like number 1. What's number 1? What's the company I'm thinking of? Transformed everything.
AstraZeneca and Pfizer have done pretty well, Seamus.
Yeah, although they've got competitors, but they're just a drugs company. They're just a drugs company.
Apple.
Well, Apple, Claire, competes with Microsoft, it competes with Facebook, content providers, and so on. But Google and so on. But yeah, so my final one, I'm not saying I'm right, but my final one, my poster child for destructive business models is Uber, the taxi model Uber, and the way Uber and now all its competitors has just destroyed the conventional taxi model anywhere in the world. Does anyone here use Uber before lockdown? Yeah, it's transformational, isn't it? It just changes everything. You've got your own personal car system. So my point is this, that if you've got a great business model, you'll just make money. So we should be spending all our time on our business model because that way we'll make more money. Do sports boards spend all that time on their business model? No, not a lot of evidence of it at all. Now, I know there's some people on this call who do, and that's because they're good boards, because they get it, they understand. Okay, so one way in which you can create value or destroy value is the quality of your business model. Is it a good business model or is it a weak?
Yeah, Seamus, one of the problems with sports is that they tend to focus on revenue above everything, or generating revenue, and a lot of them get into problems because they do that, because they're not actually sustainable or resilient. They're just focused on how much revenue we can deliver, and they think that's a proxy for success.
Yeah, and Charles, a proper grown-up conversation at board level would be, how do we measure success? Is that a discussion that many boards have? Not that I've seen. You know, what are our key performance indicators? What are our KPIs? What drives what? And how do we drive the ultimate, which is what you mentioned, the long-term sustainability of our sport and the future success of our sport?
Seamus,
yeah.
Seamus, so it's Chris Brindley. I think Charles raises a really, really valid point. Look, I'm a slave to what's known as the balanced business scorecard. And I think a balanced business scorecard is the thing that really underpins long-term sustainable success. And whilst financial is part of that scorecard, one of the quadrants, you have to have your customer and your people, your team. You have to have them at your foresight as well. And you have to treat your people brilliantly. You have to treat your customers brilliantly, because customers can decide where they choose to spend their revenue more so than ever before. But also what good boards do is understand about internal quality, about making sure that teams and customers get the right service model as well, so it's easy for them to do business with, that money isn't wasted. Actually, you talk about advanced technology, using the digital age to communicate, and add on top of that the personalised service. So often I believe that technology can do the heavy lifting and allow people capacity to have great conversations with customers now and in the future. And I think you're right, a lot of people see the short term, how is my profit and loss? And they make some really bad decisions. I'm with you. Sport has got a lot to learn when it comes to a balanced business scorecard. So I just want to endorse that comment.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. Absolutely. And the point in all of this
That's
is,
because they're not run very professionally, most of them. That's why.
Yeah.
Fair point.
And the point is, we need to get this professionalism into sport. In fact, if there was one strategy which sums up what this group should be about, it's about the professionalization of sport and getting sport to be fully professional. And we've got a lot of good boards in sport, and we've got a lot of poor boards in sport, and we've got a lot of time wasters in sport. And there's no excuse. We need to get rid of those people, and we need to bring in people who actually know how to be a director. And that doesn't mean you have to be from a corporate background at all. You could be brilliant from a not-for-profit background or from any other background. Okay. Well,
sorry, funnily enough, just on that front, because you mentioned about corporate background, and obviously you've got experience of both. I think sometimes there's a bit of a misunderstanding almost that I think sports boards get quite a bad name, to be honest. So I've got quite a lot of experience from mainly PLC corporate environments, and I would say there's an equal amount of good and bad board members in the biggest corporates in this country than there are in quite small sports organisations as well. And it may be for different reasons. So to a certain degree, it may be because of, rather than being lack of training, it's like not really having the right purpose at heart. You're not there for the right reasons. You're just trying to roll up and get like a number of annuity board appointments, basically. But I do see many bad examples also in sort of private sector of like not great board people.
Ed, I wouldn't disagree with you. I think it's changing.
Yeah.
I think we're getting better. I think there were a lot of NAF directors around 20 years ago, and they're being weeded out. And that's not least being pushed like initiatives such as Hampton Alexander to get more women into boards, get more Black, Asian, minority, ethnic people, performing people into boards and so on. I agree with you. And I certainly wouldn't hold up corporate UK PLC as my standard bearer of good governance. I totally accept the point. I would simply say that it's improving everywhere. It's improving in the corporate world, and it's improving in sport. Yeah. Okay, so look, we've got about 10 minutes left. Oh no, 15. I just want to make, just to finish off this discussion, I want to ask you this question, therefore. Value comes from either the quality of your business model. It's either good or bad, and you either make money or you lose money. And that is very, very straightforward. What's the other source of value creation or value destruction? Because remember, if you want to be on a board as a director and you're there to grow the value of the organization, you need to know where the value is coming from. So we've already agreed it comes from, on the one hand, the business model. What's the other driver of good quality decision making? What's the other driver of value creation? Any idea? What? It's got a name. I'll tell you what it's called. It's called governance.
No problem. I'm coming. I'm listening to something. It's live.
Yeah, don't go. Yeah, this is good stuff. So the other reason why organizations destroy value or create value is through their governance. And that's why we're doing this. Okay, so I can't get involved in your business model. That's your job. What I can help you understand is the important role of governance as the other source of value creation, value destruction. In other words, there are two things we need for any organization to be successful. One is to create value, and to go to Charles's point, and Chris's point, that doesn't just mean revenues or money. It's how do we define value? So that might be participation, it could be anything. So how do we create value? And then how do we protect that value? How well do we run our organization? Okay. And the way in which we run our organization is called governance. So if we run our organization well, the value which gets created gets protected. And if we run our organization badly, the value that gets created gets dissipated, it gets wasted. So you could be a really successful sport, let's say, creating a lot of money, let's say. But if you're running yourself badly, it's just going through your fingers and down through the gutter and down into the sewers. So the way in which you protect your value can be as important as how you create the value, and you protect your value through the quality of your governance. And so I just got up these people here to see if you know who they are. And these are all signs of governance failure. These are signs of organizations that destroy trust massively because of governance failing. So do you recognize, you must recognize a lot of the names there, yeah? So top left-hand corner, Lamine Diack, Sebco's predecessor, international athletics, who is now in his 80s under house arrest in Paris, and the French authorities have now said they're going to go ahead with prosecuting him despite his age and despite his ill health. He will be found guilty and he will go to jail in his 80s, okay, because of the levels of corruption inside the international athletics. We know what Lance Armstrong did with cycling, bottom left. We know the story of Dean Richards and Bloodgate, where he was banned as a coach for getting a player to pretend they were bleeding on the pitch, and which even led to the point where to persuade the match officials that this player had bled on the pitch, they took him back to the changing room and the club doctor then cut his lip. One of the most unethical things that you could ever happen on the sports field. Bernie Ecclestone paid 80 million to a German court to get off all the charges of bribery and corruption against him. My favorite one is top right. Who's that? Who's the guy top right? Any idea?
Blazer, is it?
Chuck Blazer. Chuck Blazer. Okay, so he's dead now, suffered from terrible health. Good job, probably, in a way, that he's dead, because if he was still alive, he'd be looking over his shoulder every day of the week, because he's the one who gave evidence against Sepp Blatter that got Sepp Blatter removed from FIFA. Now, Chuck Blazer is the only person in New York who had 2 apartments in Trump Towers. Trump only has 1 apartment in Trump Towers. Chuck Blazer had 2 apartments. Who were the 2 apartments for in Trump Towers? Chuck Blazer had 2 apartments in Trump Towers. Who were they for? Any idea? The first was for himself, probably, and Sepp Blatter. The second was for his pet cats, for his pets. And that is a fact. That is established. That is not making it up. That is established fact. That was the level of corruption inside FIFA and UEFA. He made 10 million out of bribes by running FIFA North America and South America. So these are the issues that we need to think about in terms of where is the value in the sport and how does value get destroyed. And just in case you think that's all a little bit, so, you know, governance failure equals value destruction. And just in case you think that that's all a little bit too another part of the world or too much in the past, who are these three? Recognize them? All three currently undergoing regulatory investigations from UK Sport and Sport England. Top left, British bobsleigh, allegations of bullying, racism, everything like that. Top right, Shane Sutton, British cycling, the Jiffy bag, all of that. And of course, bottom, British gymnastics and Jane Allen. And just to take British gymnastics as an example, there is a competitor to British gymnastics called UK gymnastics. And UK gymnastics are saying everybody is leaving British gymnastics because British gymnastics cannot be trusted. And so all those revenues are going from British gymnastics into UK gymnastics, even if it turns out that it will turn out that British gymnastics gets acquitted in the regulatory investigation. So sport is bedeviled by this kind of stuff. And I want to take the slides down now because, you know, we're coming towards the end and we just need to have a discussion amongst ourselves. The point is sport, taking Ed's point, you know, it's not just sport, corporate world, charities, Kids Company, if you saw that recent news about Kids Company the other week and so on. It's all, value creation is all about how good a business model you've got. Have you got more money coming in than you've got going out? Because if you haven't, you're bust. And then how good are you at running your organization? How good is your governance? And quite obviously, if you have a fantastic business model and fantastic governance, there's nothing can stop you. There's nothing can stop you. And equally, if one of those is weak, you've got a problem. And if both of them are weak, it's just a matter of weeks before you go down, or months before you go down. And this is what we want to explore in this course, which is coming up in the year ahead. You know, how do we create value? How do we protect that value? How do we act as an effective director? How do we act as an effective board? What does it look like? How can we go to someone and say, I actually know how to do this? Actually, I've got some answers. Just like Chris says, balanced scorecard, that's an answer. You know, how can we get better at this? Do you have a balanced scorecard? No. Well, let's get a balanced scorecard. We're having difficulty recruiting people onto our board. Do you have a board skills matrix? No. Well, let's get one. Let's work one up, and so on and so on. So these are the issues that we want to discuss. These are going to be practical, lots of case studies, lots of people like Catherine coming along and saying, I'm going to be asking her, what does she think is good? What does she think is bad? And can I put this out here now? Could you please tell me, let me know, or let Tom know, a question that you would like to put to Catherine? Okay. So in a month's time, or 3 weeks' time, we're going to be talking to Catherine. Could you please identify, if you wish, a question that either you can ask or I can ask that you'd like to put to Catherine about her experience in sport? And I'll be asking Catherine, what does good look like? What does bad look like? And from the perspective of the ultimate purse string holder, what are you looking for in the sports that you're prepared to sponsor? And what do you not want to see? Okay, look, so there's some thoughts, 4 minutes until we wrap up. Would anybody like to offer some thoughts, some reflections on the first half hour, which is about the program, or the second hour, which is talking about value creation and protection of value and the importance of governance in the overall scheme of things? Any thoughts, any reflections? All ears. So is Tom, not all ears as well. So please. Don't have to say anything, but is this the kind of thing that some of you think you would like to cover? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Seamus, again, I think this programme will be invaluable. I sometimes think the entry into sport, people in sport, there's a door there, but they brick it up and they put bricks on the outside so people don't quite know where the door is. Now, I'm delighted to say that since the introduction of the Sports Code of Governance, sports that are publicly funded have to be more transparent in where they advertise vacancies, how they advertise vacancies. And you only have to look at either the Sport England website or the UK Sport website. So I think now there is more opportunity than ever before. And actually, I think some people have mentioned perhaps it's been a bit lacking in transparency how people get appointed to boards. I think now that programs like this will enable people to understand what governance is, and it's not box ticking, it's not the dry, boring stuff. It truly is about that creating value. And I think enabling people to complete a really good CV or a really good covering letter, followed by a really good attendance at either an interview or an assessment centre. All of that, I think, will be invaluable in getting people better prepared. So I know when I was starting my journey in sport, there was nothing like this. And I knocked on so many brick walls, knowing there were doors behind them, but nobody wanted to let me in. So I think this is a way of dismantling those bricks. I can't speak for privately owned football clubs or other sports clubs. They're not in receipt of public money, so therefore their requirement to adhere to the code is not there yet, and I'd love to see that change. But I know I've had the benefit of working with Value Alpha from an independent board evaluation point of view. I've also had the benefit of using Tom to go out and recruit some very different directors to boards that I'm responsible for finding vacancies and successful candidates. And I didn't pick any of the old guard. I picked young, forward-thinking people who understood governance as the way to create value rather than what section 7.4 of the Memorandum and Articles of Association said. Your company secretary can do that for you. You need the board to be forward-thinking, looking into the future and growing value, which is sometimes it's viewers, it's eyeballs, it's attendances, but it's all boils down to growing value for everybody concerned. So I would recommend it, knowing the people involved that are running this, and that's you and Tom.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chris. That's very kind of you. That's very kind of you. Well, look, guys, because it's the hour and we ought to say goodbye to each other. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it interesting, stimulating. That's what we'll be doing for the year ahead, having those kind of discussions based on the theory, so we don't leave the theory behind, but looking at the case studies of VIP guest speakers and all of that kind of good stuff. So hope that works for you. I hope you feel encouraged to join up, to tell your colleagues about it, to tell your friends about it. Tell your friends about Catherine Granger. We're going to market it quite heavily because she's a special person and we need as many people to have access to her thinking as possible, especially given her importance. So I'd like to say thanks. Goodbye, Tom. I don't know if you want to say goodbye on behalf of all of us, but thank you very much for being very participative. I really enjoyed it and really looking forward to being involved with you guys in the year ahead. So thank you very much and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Seamus. Fantastic first session, really interesting overview and already some really salient points that I'll take away. Just to reiterate that the next session with Catherine is open to everybody. So do please circulate it to your networks. It'd be great to get many people there as possible. And the objective of this program is all about improving governance in the sports that we care about. So do spread the word. If anybody's got any questions about the PBSL, about this program, or some of the other programs that we're running, please feel free to get in touch with me directly or us at the PBSL via the website and the email. Any questions, I can stay around for 5 minutes now if anybody's got any points they'd like to raise. But otherwise, we look forward to seeing you soon at the next session. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tom. Cheers. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Good weekend.